and then I'm going to pass it over to Paul to give a little more information about our particular concerns.
Paul, you want this cut off?
Yes, and could I get the lights back down? Well, thank you very much for inviting me to participate today. I came up from Tacoma Park, Maryland yesterday, and it's a long drive, but the point of this is that I think that your community is an extremely important community to speak to, and particularly it's extremely important to talk to this community because you have a coalition effort going that we view as very strategic and worth cultivating and helping you cultivate this because you are a community in unique danger. And this is why I've made the trip, because I think that you need to be made aware of that issue. On March 11th, 2011, we understood early in the morning that there was a station blackout after the earthquake and tsunami hit the eastern coast of Japan. And we put out a media advisory immediately that said we were available to comment. And so at 2:30 in the afternoon on March 11th, we got a call from CNN studios in Washington, D.C. To come in and participate in their news coverage that would be broadcast on the Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer that evening. And so I found myself in a very small room. I need to keep track of time here too. I found myself in a very small room. It was like the size of a closet with a camera, and the correspondent, Jean Meserve. Now, Jean is the sister of the former commissioner of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So here I am, sitting in a closet with a camera with the sister of the former commissioner, chair of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So this is a loaded situation. And so we talked for about 10 minutes, and on camera, and I said, look, a nuclear accident anywhere is a nuclear accident everywhere, and this has been the story since nuclear power immemorial. But she said, look, Mr. Gunter, in the simplest terms, what's your concern? And I said, well, our concern is that these reactors could literally blow the roof off. And Saturday morning, we saw explosions, and then in successive explosions, we saw that happen. And if you look at the transcript of the CNN Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer on for the March 11th coverage, it's got that little soundbite from me, and then it flips over to the Tony Petranglia, who's the public relations officer for the Nuclear Energy Institute, which is the largest nuclear lobby group in the world probably, but certainly he said that, the odds of that are very, very remote. We don't see anything like that happening. And what I want to make clear to you is that this nuclear industry operates not on a principle of vulnerability, but on a principle of probability. And so every day that nuclear power plants operate, they operate on a principle of a roulette wheel. It's got lots of numbers on it, millions of numbers. I mean, the probability is, they say 1 in a million years, and that's, they're adding up all the operating minutes of all the reactors around the world, and this is what they come up with. They come up with a probability. But your number can come up. And what we were speaking to, what I was speaking to that day, was the vulnerability. So when you play this game of roulette, that if your number comes up, the vulnerability is there. And we've known about this, and what I was speaking to was a history that I've known about since I first became involved in this issue in 1975. We saw documents from the the predecessor of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which is the federal regulator, is the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission. And on September 20th, 1972, a top safety officer, Dr. Stephen Anauer, wrote a memo to his colleagues to say that, you know, the General Electric Mark I boiling water reactor is not a quality product. In fact, what he points out is that the containment system, which is not this building here. This is not containment. This is a biological shield. The containment is the dry well, which is a bulbous structure that's connected by 10 large diameter pipes, bays that go into a wet well, which is 18 feet in diameter and contains 1 million gallons of water. And the volume of the Mark I is 1/6 of the size of the TMI volume that you saw on the earlier slide here. So what Anauer identified was that volumetrically, the Mark I's, when General Electric offered them to the commercial power industry, they presented a commercial edge that you can build these things quicker and you can build them cheaper because there's less concrete and there's less steel. And so we built several of these by 1972, and then Anauer said, you know, if this is challenged by a severe accident, it's going to fail. And 5 days later, Anauer's boss, Joseph Hendry, wrote back to him and said, you know, Steve, I think you've got some good points here, but if we follow up on this, this will mean the end of nuclear power. And they discounted his concerns. And in fact, when Anauer's memo had further gone on to say we should discourage all further use of the Mark I and issue no more licenses. And when his offer was ignored, they went on through General Electric and the power utilities and the Atomic Energy Commission and then its successor, the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, to build 16 more of these reactors and even licensed 3 new construction permits. So they had a bunch in the chute that they needed to get done, and then they had the audacity to issue 3 more construction permits. And so they finished, and then we had 24 of these things. And so by 1986, another NRC safety officer, Dr. Harold Denton, now with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, said that we have, in the assessments of their safety studies, they calculated that it was a 90% chance of failure if the Mark I was ever challenged by a overpressurization accident. So high probability of failure, now confirmed. But rather than shut the Mark I down, what they decided to do was collaborate with the nuclear industry to, rather than protect the American public, protect the financial interests of General Electric and the U.S. nuclear industry by allowing for a change in the concept of containment. And since the containment was had never been considered reliable, they decided that they would install an option for a reliable vent. So they compromised the license condition, which was, as Fitzpatrick and 9 Mile Point were licensed to be essentially leak tight, they provided them an option to voluntarily install a what they call a reliable hardened vent, which meant that this component would be provided with an 8-inch hardened line that runs out here to the 100 or 300-foot stack that you can see if you look at the plans. And on that vent is a control room operated butterfly valve and a 30-pound per square inch carbon rupture disc. So in the event of a severe accident, the control room is now provided with the option to vent containment to save it, and temporarily vent a severe accident so that they don't permanently destroy the reactor. And then once the vent is open, if to provide for some safety that there's not an inadvertent release or inadvertent operation, they put the 30 psi rupture disc in. So basically at car tire pressure, if it increases over that, that carbon rupture disc will open, and a direct line will be open from a severe accident in the reactor core, the steam, the radioactivity, the hydrogen, the oxygen, the explosive environment that was designed to go in here and then be quenched in that 1 million gallons of water, but then the overpressure will then come out that 8-inch line and then vent it. That didn't work at Fukushima, obviously. I mean, we saw those explosions, and what we now understand is that because of the power failures, the vents either failed to open or failed to stay open, and the radiation fields that were created by the accidents were so high that workers could not get in there to manually open those valves. But going back to in 1989, knowing all of the vulnerabilities, the NRC provided the operators with the ability to continue to operate with an unreliable containment by putting a reliable vent on it, so-called. And because it was voluntary, the utilities were provided with an option. And of all the 24 reactors in the United States, Fitzpatrick, we find out, is the exception of the Mark I community, because they decided that for want of not spending $680,000, they decided that it was not cost beneficial to put a vent onto their Mark I. So they now rely upon a venting system as documented by documents to the US NRC that we've provided in 1992, that a pre-existing vent system that was put in during routine operations, following routine operations, if you want to do maintenance work, to vent, to purge the containment structure, that the operators will open this pre-existing vent to purge the atmosphere so that they can get in there and inspect this piece of equipment or inspect the dry well. And it's a low pressure venting system. So New York Power Authority was credited under this voluntary program to use a low pressure vent pre-existing to the problems that were identified as their high pressure system that would be credited for use in the event of a severe accident. And in the documents that they provided as their argument to the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, they admit that the venting system that they're relying upon will be destroyed by the accident, and that as a result of the destruction of the vent that is pre-existing, that it will blow the doors off an auxiliary building, which will then open up the release path for an accident, the radioactivity, the hydrogen gas, through these doors on the auxiliary building, and they argue that that's okay. And they further argue that there will be no likely ignition sources for the hydrogen gas that is generated in that accident. Now, what we saw at Fukushima Daiichi was a station blackout. So there was no power. They had depleted the batteries. They had lost the emergency backup. They had lost the electrical grid. So by demonstration, by reality, we now know that, you know, there was a spark somewhere. And what your community's life and livelihood relies upon now is a false assumption, is a plan that puts the financial interest of a corporation ahead of your own life and livelihood. And that as a result, the a production agenda is more important than the safety margins for your communities. And so that's our concern, that we have a history, and now we have a demonstration, and we know that in the event of your number coming up in that roulette wheel, that there's a high probability that what you'll see is what happened at Fukushima Daiichi. So, and I think what we're going to do is take questions after we're all done, in the sake of time. So, I think I'm going to end it right there. Okay.